Okay, we're going to talk about cardiovascular disorders this week. Um, and so we've learned about the structure and the function of the human cardiovascular system. And now we're going to describe diseases of that system. We've already talked about hypertension a little bit, but now we're going to talk about atherosclerosis, heart attack, stroke, congestive heart failure, and a number of other causes that are really all related. And these are the major causes of death for Americans. Probably about half of all deaths are related to these types of deaths. And there's often several underlying problems here. And one of the good things about this is that there are lifestyle factors that can be modified. And so we'll describe these lifestyle factors that increase the risk of cardiovascular disease, as well as those that reduce the chance that you're going to have the disease. And so here I have a picture on this first slide of a angiogram. This is when they inject a radioactive dye into the blood vessels, and then they take a picture as it goes through the blood vessels of the body. And you can see how blood is flowing through these vessels. And so here there's a blockage, and this is in an artery that's on the surface of the heart. And so right there, where the occluded coronary artery is, you can see it goes from abruptly from being a lot of blood flowing to none. And this is a typical symptom of a cardiovascular disease called atherosclerosis, and so a really, really important condition. All right, so we've used this slide before. The cardiovascular system is our main transport system in the body. It transports many things, including oxygen, nutrients like glucose, and lipids and proteins, and then waste products like carbon dioxide and ammonia. Also, we use it to transport hormones. It contains blood clotting and immune cells in there. And so this is a really important system. The heart generates the flow, and then the arteries, capillaries, and veins carry blood to the entire human body. Here's a picture of the heart. The heart itself is just four simple chambers. These chambers are surrounded by muscle, cardiac muscle, and that muscle contracts, and so it squeezes the chamber, and that squeezing forces the blood out through the arteries past valves. And so that's how the heart works. And so we've gone through the right atrium and the right ventricle, and the two valves, the tricuspid and pulmonary semilunar valve. The right side of the heart pumps blood to the lungs where it picks up oxygen, and then it comes back to the left atrium where it contracts. When the left atrium contracts, the blood goes to the left atrium or left ventricle, and the left ventricle pumps it out into the aorta, where it there goes throughout the body. Okay, and so that was our introduction to the anatomy of the heart. You can see that this is a cross section showing it. It's a diagram. One of the really important things about the heart that I didn't show you was the heart. Not only does it have these muscles that are on the chambers in the walls of the chambers, but there's also the heart has its own blood supply. And this is really crucial. The heart needs a steady supply of blood, and the structures that bring blood to the heart are the coronary arteries. They're the first branch off the blood vessel that leads away from the heart, and so it gets the richest, the best blood, the blood that has the most oxygen goes first to the heart muscle. And this is really important because the heart muscle, unlike other muscles of your body, has to have oxygen. If the heart cells don't get oxygen, really within 4 or 5 minutes, those cells start to die. And so really here, this picture on the left, this is the important picture. There's the right and left coronary arteries. These distribute blood all to the heart muscle, and so it's really important. We're going to talk more about those today. And so the heart generates, as it's each stroke and generates flow that goes into arteries, then that flow is going to go throughout the body. The heart supplies the force that supplies blood pressure, and that's going to force blood throughout the body. Then There are other factors that affect blood, the volume of blood, what kind of shape the arteries are in. If the arteries are wide open, we call them dilated, and that makes it easier for the blood to flow. And so and that's caused by muscles in the arteries. And so these are vasoconstriction and vasodilation affects the resistance to flow. And then sometimes there can be blockages, which we're going to talk about. Then other things that affect blood flow and pressure besides the heart itself are how much blood has to be pumped, how far, so the length of the vessels. This is larger in large people, so they have higher blood pressure. And so really big people, tall and heavy, have more blood vessels and have higher pressure. And then the thickness of blood. Okay, so we've started talking already about hypertension. And in one of the previous programs, I talked about hypertension. That hypertension uh, is high resting blood pressure. And so even when the body's at rest, the blood pressure is very high. Over 140 over 90 is anything above that at rest is considered hypertension. And this is caused by a variety of factors. In some people, it's caused by dietary sodium. Their body retains too much sodium, and so it retains too much fluid, and all that extra fluid in the arteries and veins elevates pressure. But this can also be caused by other factors. We know other risk factors for hypertension. These include obesity, stress, smoking, and sometimes just unknown factors. And having these high pressure in the arteries leads to damage in small arteries, like in the kidneys or in the eyes. And so high blood pressure, hypertension, is the leading cause of kidney failure. It's also the leading cause of blindness, and it's strongly related to stroke, heart attacks, and congestive heart failure. And so I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, but this is really close to home for me because in 2019, my mom passed away. And she passed away. She had hypertension for about 25 years, and that led to congestive heart failure, where the muscles in her heart got kind of flabby, and so the heart could no longer pump enough blood to keep it going, and so fluid was backing up into her legs, into her abdominal cavity, and most importantly into her lungs. And so this had been going on for quite a while, but what finally caused death was the inability to remove fluid from her lungs. And so that's a typical death of someone with congestive heart failure. So a very hard year for me, partly because of that. And that's caused by damage due to hypertension. After 25 years of having her heart worked really hard, even at rest, the heart muscle thickens, and the muscle doesn't have enough oxygen because it's slightly under working too hard and unable to get enough oxygen from those coronary arteries. And so cells begin to die, and that's why the heart gets flabby. The other big contributing cause to my mom's death was atherosclerosis. And this is one of the most important and most common diseases in older adults. And it's atherosclerosis. There's the accumulation of plaque in the walls of arteries, and these are deposits of cholesterol and fatty material and calcium that starts to block the walls of the artery and makes the artery narrower and narrower, and so reduces the flow of blood to downstream tissues. This is very, very bad because if those tissues are the heart or the brain, they can start to die within a few minutes. This is also, it roughens up the inner surface of the arteries, and so it's a place where a blood clot can form. And so atherosclerosis is kind of similar to hypertension. There's not a lot of symptoms until late in the game. And so as people get older, they start having these plaques deposited in their arteries. And this is particularly a problem for people that have diets that are rich in saturated fats and cholesterol. So red meats, dairy products, Um, those are the types of foods, and particularly if you're overweight, inactive, you smoke, and are under stress, these deposits will accumulate over time. And if they happen in those coronary arteries, it leads to a heart attack, possibly. If it happens in the arteries that are um, in the brain, it can lead to stroke. Okay, so very, very serious and important disease process. And so basically, what we have are pipes. These arteries serve as transport pipes, and that blood has to be pumped through them. And that pipe can be blocked by these plaques that are mostly fat and cholesterol, and then there's some inflammation. And here's a cross section of an actual artery, and it's more than 90% blocked. The open area should be almost all the light pink. It should be this big open thing that goes from one side to the other, but instead there's only a little open area here. So so huge problem. Um, this there's all these risk factors that are associated with this. Once this happened, there's not enough oxygen downstream. This is called ischemia. And ischemia causes heart cells to start to die. It causes brain cells to start to die. Um, and so this can be associated with stroke or heart attacks. In my mom's case, this was congestive heart failure, so that her heart muscle was thickened because of hypertension. And as these plaques occurred, those cells weren't getting enough oxygen. And so they started to die. And so the heart was pumping less efficiently than it did. And so it can't move all the fluid. And so backing up fluid caused big problems for her. Now there are some surgeries that can clean this up. They can put in what are called stents, or they can do angioplasty. And so that goes into that opening and it pushes the fat to the side. And so this opens it up past the blockage. Usually these blockages don't happen along the whole artery, but only in one or two spots. And so sometimes you can have a single bypass, you can have double bypass, triple or quadruple bypasses. And that's where they put an artery that goes around there. So they take an artery from somewhere in the body where it's less needed and go around a blockage. They can also use medications. There are medications that help lower the amount of cholesterol. There are medications that are called vasodilators that can help the artery kind of open up wider, and so that gets more blood past these blockages. But a lot of this has to be lifestyle changes, um, changing people's diet and changing their exercise habits so that they're less likely to form this. Among the most important things to change is smoking. Nicotine turns out to be very bad for people with atherosclerosis and hypertension. Nicotine causes the muscles in the walls of the arteries to contract, and that makes the artery narrower. It gets harder to pump blood through it, and it reduces the blood flow downstream. This is called vasoconstriction, and nicotine's a really powerful vasoconstrictor. Smoking is one of the worst things you can do if you have hypertension or you have heart attacks or atherosclerosis. In fact, it can precipitate a heart attack. So it's very important to get older adults to stop smoking if they have those problems and to prevent younger adults from smoking. And not only just smoking, it's vaping, it's also chewing tobacco. Any form of nicotine can do this. Smoking in particular also has carbon monoxide, which causes hemoglobin to become less useful. And in response, people make more hemoglobin and more red blood cells, so their blood gets thicker and harder to pump. So a real big problem. Okay, another lifestyle factor that's important to modify is exercise. People need to be physically active. And particularly, they need a type of exercise called aerobic exercise. This means that the exercise, people can do it without becoming out of breath. It raises their heart rate, and so that they breathe harder for an extended period of time, like 15 to 20 minutes. And they do this several times a week. This has really important effects for their cardiovascular system and for their respiratory system as well. This improves the efficiency of the heart. More blood is pumped with each stroke. The heart beats less often, and so it gets more blood supplied to itself. This also causes the arteries to vasodilate, and so it lowers blood pressure at rest and lowers blood pressure overall. Aerobic exercise is also extremely helpful because it's among the best exercises for weight loss. And so it can improve glucose levels as well. And it turns out another really important risk factor is diabetes. People with diabetes have really high risk. And so this doesn't mean that you have to get dressed up in spandex and join a class. Aerobic exercise just means that you're physically active enough to raise your heart rate for 15 to 20 minutes at a time. Okay, and this woman right here, hopefully we all look so good when we do our exercise, but she's doing a nice type of aerobic exercise. She's walking a dog. And that's probably the type of exercise people need. A fairly active walk, 15 or 20 minutes that you do several times a week or daily. Those are the types of things that will really improve your cardiovascular health. Other types of exercise resistant training are good for you, but not helpful in a cardiovascular way. And so, like weightlifting, really won't help you in a cardiovascular way. It will improve your muscle strength and your bone strength and your tendons, but not in a cardiovascular way. And so it can actually be kind of risky for cardiovascular patients. They should start slow, work while they're not too out of breath, and gradually increase the intensity and duration of their exercise. Okay, so we're going to stop there. Hopefully this will never be a picture of your heart or the heart of someone you know, but it's very likely. Cardiovascular diseases, stroke, congestive heart failure, hypertension, and heart attacks probably kill more than half of all Americans. And so these are really important for us to know about these and to be able to talk to the doctor and to understand a healthy lifestyle is really important, not just when you get sick, but it can prevent you from ever getting sick. Okay, so we'll stop right there, and that should do it.